Everywhere I go, everywhere I travel, I see people. The whole planet is full of them. Some walk alone, some with a companion, and others go about in groups. Human beings is the name they go by, and they sure love to live huddled together in big, sprawling cities. They all seem very busy doing this and that, and getting on with their lives. Yep, the people of the world tend to look very productive and in charge. If I went and talked to any of them, if I went and interviewed people and asked each of them whether they think they're in charge of their own destinies, I wonder what kind of answers I'd get. Most of them would confidently say, sure, I'm in charge of my own life path. And what about me? Am I really in charge of my own destiny? Do I know where I've come from, why I'm here, and where I'm going? After all, some people would say that just by using this credit card, I'm a virtual serf to powerful men who profit from my existence. Some have said we're all veritable slaves in an invisible penitentiary. If that's the case, then none of us are in charge of our lives. We only think we are, and that's kind of frightening. Maybe that invisible prison does exist. Maybe I can't see it because I've been trained not to be able to see it. Can that situation never change? After all, I sure don't like to think of myself as being on someone else's chain. I think it's time to investigate these matters. When in doubt, find out. That's the key. There are those who've looked into these matters long before my time. What did they have to say? That's what I'd like to know.
So it says here, there's an interesting caption that says, "Here stands the new man. His conception of reality is a dance of electronic images fired into his forebrain, a gossamer construction of his masters designed so that he will not under any circumstances perceive the actual or the real. His happiness is delivered to him through a tube or an electronic connection. His God lurks behind an electronic curtain. And when the curtain is pulled away, we find the CIA sorcerer and the media manipulator." Jim Keith, Mind Control, Mass Control, just one of the fine books on, the manipulation of consciousness that he did before he sadly basically was killed. He was one of the people, I think, one of few who understood that the real war is a war on consciousness. It's very important to always remember that it may have so many other permutations. Now we're seeing it's mass killings in America or what have you. But and then all heads turn. As soon as that comes on the little media framed image, then people are shocked. And they turn to that as if it's some sort of freak phenomena or something like that. It's actually, the sad case is it's not freak. And anyone who's really studied mind control understands that mind control is ubiquitous. It's almost the question of who is not mind controlled, as opposed to who is mind controlled. It's just a difference in degree. The whole question of what is consciousness and how it can be manipulated is one of the most crucial questions of our time. In my work, it really goes along with the whole question of the origins of evil. I mean, it's origins of evil / war on consciousness, and the whole manipulation of man's thinking, his behavior, his biology. And this question has distinguished some of the greatest scholars in the world, people like Wilhelm Reich. But in a more modern context, even people like Alex Constantine, Jim Keefe, Jim Marrs to a certain extent has gone into this.
Well, in ancient times they used the sword and they used the gun and they used other methods like religion for pushing the populace around and getting people to do what was wanted. But in recent times, in the 20th century, there are new technologies that provide the expertise to control people totally without their knowledge. Means of electronic entrainment, brain control implants, methods of advertising that manipulate us against our will. And this isn't science fiction, this is something that's very documented. The Manchurian Candidate, of course, was about the creation of a mind-controlled assassin who, as I recollect, it's been years since I've seen the film, was going to be activated to kill the president. Now this is wild science fiction, crazy impossibility, it just complete nuttiness, but then one takes into consideration the realization that Sirhan, for instance, after he killed Robert F. Kennedy, was examined by several experts, several hypnotherapists, and they came to the conclusion that Sirhan was under hypnotic control when he killed Kennedy. They don't make a big deal out of that on 60 Minutes, but that just happens to be the fact.
There's been others who've theorized, Fritz Springmeier has done some fantastic work on the manipulation of the human brain through technotronic means. What am I saying? It's weaponry, psychic weaponry, radiotronic weaponry that's being used, ELF waves, all sorts of different technologies that are patented. People can go and find out about it, research it, discover it. If you're coming from the world of Ted Gunderson and John DeCamp, we even find out that families who are connected to secret agencies, or maybe who've been communist spies, or who've been part of the Nazi network, who've found homes in America, people who are connected to Operation Paperclip and to the NSA, there's histories of them selling their own children into, mind control experiments. Amazingly, people in the military. This is a documented, known fact. Just unbelievable to think of it, But the most important thing is always to remember that there is this kind of war going on, even though you may not realize it, and also to realize that there's also the cover-up campaign against mind control. The people who are perpetrating this, who are putting these sleepers out there, who are planning assassinations, who are behind, Sirhan, all the way up through Son of Sam and Mark Hinckley, David Chapman. The list is endless. When you start thinking about it, Jim Jones. This has all been exposed as sort of mind control based cults, but the fact is they don't want the average person realizing this. They don't want. So there's the mind control concept or experimentation, and then there's the smokescreen as well. So you're dealing with two different things here. You're dealing with the fact itself, which is a very interesting study, but then you have all the rebuttal and the general ubiquitous consensus that no, there's no such thing at all. It's the lone gunman. It's the lone nut, or disgruntled teens, when it comes to Columbine and some of these others, just teens going out of control. Okay, teens going out of control is one thing. Teens with automatic weapons that you can only find from, government agencies and military camps is another. And you track back and you find out the history of these people being connected to some of these orgs and institutions and military establishments. David Berkowitz has revealed a great deal from prison about that and the elaborate Luciferian satanic networks that work with mind control on all its levels, and tying into the military establishment. This has been thoroughly documented.
In 1993, announced that the entire spree was engineered by a satanic cult, and others had participated in the plot.
Of course, everyone had played a role as far as the chanting and the praying. Everyone had a role in that, and understanding that, this was going to be another sacrifice to our gods, bunch of scumbags that they were, our gods, Lucifer and his crew, and we said, yeah, this is going to be another one for you, and I said,
certainly recommend Maury Terry's Ultimate Evil, in which Berkowitz reveals the whole level of operations, government black ops, and mind control behind the Son of Sam, behind the Son of Sam killings. That ties into people also blowing the whistle, like Stanley Kubrick. He making movies, trying to reveal some of this stuff, and then he suddenly mysteriously dies. So there's a lot of. But anyone who's really studied this subject for a long time knows that it's not modern. It doesn't just date from the period of the discovery of America or whatever. You can take it back to England. Very strange happenings with serial killers there, like the one that jumps to mind, of course, is Peter Sutcliffe. Some of the revelations he made in court. He was known as the Yorkshire Ripper. I've made a detailed study of so many of these kinds of personalities, both in America and in England, and the same refrain. It's almost unbelievable how common the refrain is. Not just about their own psychological upbringing with their parents and so on, but during their spree of crimes. They made me do it. Voices made me do it. Hey Doc, I'm possessed.
Do it.
He's mine!
You gotta have him decide, just go. Get in the next taxi and just go. Go!
Don't do it.
You liar.
That's not what we're here for. That's not what we're here for.
He signed your record and he was nice. Put the date on and everything, he was kind. But I wanna kill him, he's mine. I want him. Help me, devil. Please. Give me the power. Oh, boy. I want to.
No!
God, no. No.
Nobody! You're nothing!
He wasn't phony. Just get in a taxi.
You coward, you phony!
Get in a taxi and go home. You got your autograph. Go home,
Frame it, put it on the wall. Put it on the wall!
Don't listen to them. Don't listen to them.
There's no place like home.
Go home. Mr. Lennon?
They've had this whole run-in with doctors. The Hungerford killing, for instance. The name of the perpetrator escapes me right now, but it's the famous Hungerford case. Is blatant mind control. And the guy having serious problems, committing his crime maybe within half an hour of having a phone call from his specialist. A bizarre phone call was recorded in which the guy lifts the phone, it's perfectly normal, lifts the phone, puts it down, goes upstairs, gets on his hunting attire, his military fatigues, arms himself to the teeth with all of this, hunting attire, and then goes down, into Hungerford and basically slaughters a lot of people. And then, the normal, ubiquitous, he kills himself out of remorse bit at the end. No, he killed himself at the end after the head detective arrives and through a loudspeaker or through some sort of a bullhorn coaxes him out.
Hey Johnny, come out, give yourself up, you're surrounded.
And then you hear a shot. So how do we know that that particular speech from that detective or that chief of police is not loaded with what they call trigger terms? We know it exists in backward masking. We know that codes have been used in the military. Well, language is a communication device. How do we not know that in that speech, coded, embedded within that particular speech, when they're saying, hey Johnny, come out, give yourself up, you're surrounded, how do we not know that within that is not some trigger word, and then bang, pop, you hear, and then the media will never know, it's another mystery, nobody will ever come to and then the media unleash their story for you. They have their little story and the weeping parents, and we had no idea that our son was such a lunatic. No, the whole world now knows that he's a mass murdering psychopath, but you didn't know? So, we got whole questions there that need to be looked at and investigated. Who are the parents of these people? What is all this symbolism about? are these just, disgruntled people? There's a lot of disgruntled people in the world. There's a lot of frustrated, jaded teens, but a lot of them don't, get into Trans Ams and drive them through, McDonald's windows. A lot of them don't go and buy automatic weapons and murder innocent people. So people need to wake up and realize this thing is so much deeper. And then the history of it. The history of it goes back through the Assassins, which was the Islamic, during the Crusades. The Crusaders, the Western Crusaders were absolutely stunned, you see, about how it could be that these Saracens and these Islamic warriors were so unbelievably ruthless and just so dedicated, almost had no fear of death. Of course, then they subsequently find out, after they've been in the Middle East a while, that this is a hashish-based cult. These guys are on the bong before they even get on their horses, and other drugs, other kinds of mind-altering drugs, disseminated to them by their occult leaders, people of Islamic versions of Freemasonry. And it's a very elaborate story. In fact, you can pick up this story in, I think it was the book Conspiranoia, but I'm sure that Jim Keith and others have covered this. It's a pretty elaborate story of exactly how the indoctrination process of the Islamic warriors in those days. Basically, it boils down to the fact that they condition you to believe you are an angel, you are serving Allah, and those guys are all the devils, you see, and you killing them is doing great work for Allah and the Prophet. Well, if you're mind controlled into that, you're going to be raging into war and killing and having no problem being very brave and all of that, because you're conditioned to believe that there's no such thing as death, and even after you die, you're going to be surrounded by wonderful, damsels and angelic forms and all of this. So the Templars, later especially the Crusaders, after they had married in with some of these Oriental families and had got picked up a lot of this occult knowledge, started to work it out that, wait a minute, if we could have an army, if we could have agents, if we could have captains and people in our military establishment that had this kind of dedication, we could conquer the world. You see, because remember, England, Britain, is a very small place. Holland, some of the old centers of government are not particularly big. They don't have large populations. They don't have large armies. They can't compete against the great continents of the world. Alexander the Great found that out. So, but wait a minute, if you have one man who's got the power of 10 men because he's been indoctrinated, not only is this chump going to do what you tell him to do, he's also going to be a perfect fighting machine. But it means the removal, does it not, of his normal circuitry of morality. Well, nothing could be easier. Morality, as the philosophers and psychologists have told you, is about paper thin anyway. You only have to say a few choice words to somebody and they've lost their head. So nothing could be simpler. And as these chaps found out, these experimenters, that now we understand is the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. Now we understand is the, these Frankfurt School and all of these people of the 20th century. But this thing goes way back through the Assassins, through the whole drug cult, of the cult of Dionysus, where the mind-altering, again, harkens back to something I've said repeatedly in my work, is that all those things, all those modalities, all those wonderful spiritual occult practices that have the ability to take your soul up, that have the ability to enlighten you, to inspire you, to sharpen your reason, your critical ability, all those things, every one of them has the equal power in the wrong hands to do the opposite, to take you down. It's the difference between sorcery and magic. Sorcery and magic. Never end talking about this. It's a very, very important concept. And all that you see out there in the world today, especially in the media, and most of even the tinkering around with occult subjects, is a form of sorcery. And I'm not the first to have said that. And that's why there's so much insanity down the line, so much misinterpretation. Because toxic individuals in control of, occult information is wrong. It's going to go askew very easily. Because we have a vast misunderstanding of what all this means. But without even getting into all of that, the Bible, is the Bible sorcery or is the Bible magic? Is it a bit of both? So it goes back through the Assassins, it goes back through these, and not only them, there's been many cults in the Orient. The Thuggee is another one to be studying, where we get the word thug. Not only were these people funded and created by British money, by the East India Company, the Thuggees were never a problem before the British secret apparatus got there through the East India Company, and wanting to destroy and disempower the native Indians who resisted the infiltration of British elements, they formed a criminal organization, the Thuggee. They funded these, bong-smoking Shiva worshippers or whatever they were, Kali worshippers, who were no threat to anyone, nothing more than a simple faction easily taken care of in the region, suddenly have thousands and thousands of pounds. They're infiltrated by specialists from Britain, from the East India Company, to start plaguing the region, you see, and causing upheaval and disruption, by which the British government hid behind. The triads, you know, the Tong, I mean, the list is endless. So this understanding of allegiance and realizing what a fragile, pathetic creature human beings are anyway, totally traumatized, that it's very easy to just, you know, paint over or even completely erase the human sensibility, the human sensibilities of morality and so on. And it goes right back into the question of religion as well. Religion is very tied up into this, because you're not appealing to man's reason when you're dealing with mind control. That's the first thing. You're dealing to man's irrational self, which is why people like myself are so adamant about developing the reason and developing man's higher, you know, levels of consciousness, because then there's only chance of being immune to all of this. But that's not the agenda of religion. That's not the agenda of the mind controllers. They want to drag you down into an irrational, limbic, mammalian, reptilian, you know, level of consciousness, what the Indian Vedas would call the lower chakra drives, and keep you there permanently, so that you're confused and terribly weak, terribly psychologically disempowered. And so therefore you're going to seek stability, you're going to seek security through whatever kinds of handrails that are then provided for you by the system, you know. Again, the other side of this is you have the problem, and you have the historical issue, the historical problem, but you also have a new age now in which we have the internet, we have these writers, authors, so we're catching up on the game. We have even movies on the subject, incredibly detailed movies, in fact, that, you know, look into the whole of this.
They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of snakes is under their lips. Their mouths are full of bitterness and curses. And in their paths, nothing but ruin and misery. And the fear of God is not before their eyes. They have taken the hearts and minds of our leaders. They have recruited the rich and the powerful. And they have blinded us to the truth. And our human spirit is corrupted. Why do we worship greed? Because outside the limit of our sight, feeding off us, perched on top of us from birth to death, are our owners. Our owners. They have us. They control us. They are our masters. Wake up. They're all about you, all around you.
Easy to apply nails, pre-colored in 7 luscious hues. Just...
Our impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep.
Oh, goddamn hacker, that second damn night that asshole's cut in.
The movement was begun 8 months ago by a small group of scientists who discovered, quite by accident, these signals being sent through...
Thing's giving me a headache. Yeah, tell me about it. Must took the hackers months to figure out how to do this.
The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices. Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
All I would say is that we've got to not trust the media stories when any of these, atrocities take place. You've got to really search out and seek out for yourself and not believe what, the mainstream media is telling you. You have to realize that this is a very ancient thing. It's very sophisticated. And that you'll have to realize that religion plays a key part because it deals with the emotions of man, his irrational drives, and his needs. You know, man being raped on one side of what he really is spiritually, loss of center. So when you see these Sirhans, you see in these Hinkleys and these apparently lost souls, you know, who are easily manipulated, you got to realize that that is the guy next door. This is pretty much walking around in the world. But the good thing about the modern age is that you have people like Ted Gunderson and John DeCamp, you see, and whistleblowers from within. Ted Gunderson, of course, was very senior in the FBI. You know, John DeCamp was a senator. You know, that you have people from within the system now. You have, I can't remember his name, but in MASH, the show MASH, you know, B.J. Honeycutt, the guy, his name will come to me in a minute. He has made a personal investigation into child abuse and satanic circles. So you have famous actors, you know, Lee Majors and Robert Mitchum have done movies on this. You know, certain Albert Finney with Looker. You know, there's a lot of movies out there that have been covering this. Of course, The Manchurian Candidate immediately jumps to mind. With fantastic film with who was in that? It was Frank Sinatra. You know, lots of elements there, and that is not fiction. That is absolutely true, with key words, key phrases. Mark Hinckley, isn't it a coincidence that Mark Hinckley and Chapman, you know, both were reading Catcher in the Rye? You know, so just even these small sort of anecdotal connections, and the way they do it is also very interesting. How the whole process of how an actual mind control slave is made runs along pretty typical lines. They have traditional ways of doing it. It's very much based on your own profile when they've been studying you independently without your knowledge. And also, of course, we find out that many of these individuals who've gone down that road, who've been so abused this way, were in fact involved with the corps, or the the United Nations, or the media, the military. You cannot even document the cases of the people who've gone on to commit these crimes, including Oswald and Son of Sam, David Berkowitz, and other people. They've all had some sort of background in the military, or they've all worked for some sort of United Nations group, or military corps, or Peace Corps, or whatever. They've had some tie-in with some major orgs, and sometimes a lot more, sometimes full-blown, military intelligence kinds of organizations. And we even know that the conspiracy movement and the New Age movement is infiltrated by these people. There's all sorts of levels on this, all the way from the spiritual level, with religion affecting your mind and disempowering you in order to control every action, every thought you think, all the way down to this more street level, mind control, where kids are recruited from school because teachers who are in the pay of these think tanks observe the child, observe their spiritual tendencies, observe their introverted nature, because you'll always hear the same refrain. It's a very, very common refrain, which you pick up in Mark Hinckley, because he specifically was a virtuous man, actually, and his crimes were born out of a virtue that was manipulated. His virtue was to save the young from all the pestilence and evil that he saw that was rampant in the adult world. So the mind controllers would have picked up on this, and they would have looked at his profile and say, this man is kind of humanitarian, he's a bit of a loner. So he was a kind of a loner in school, yet as a loner he joined the military. Why would a loner, see, there's a contradiction right there, and they pick up on that. Why would a loner be joining something which is not only collectivized, it's highly collectivized, it's very regimented? So then they pick up conflict in his personality, and then he joins a collectivized kind of setup like the military, and then it's still super introverted. His buddies will say, oh, we didn't go on with him, he never spoke, he was dead quiet. So you've got little contradictions there. Why would a man even like that be compelled to join something totally antithetical to his nature? Was he compelled to do that? Or was he trying to break out of his own personality mold and try to do that as a way to heal himself from what he thought was a malignancy of nature? Because if you're introverted and live in the West or live in America, they'll make you feel that you're malignant, all right. It's not that introversion is malignant, quite the contrary. As the psychologists know, it's the extrovert personality type that's the easiest hypnotized. Ha ha ha. The extrovert personality, Mr. Sunshine, the one season world, getting gung-ho guy who's super successful, got everything that the material world can offer, he goes under in 2 seconds flat, but it's the introvert that you kind of, manipulate. Well, so this is the, again, contradictions.
Who wants it? Congratulations, Richard. You had some very interesting scores on the first series of tests for Parallax.
Testing for what?
The Parallax Corporation. You did apply for our training, didn't you?
Oh, Christ, that.
As you know, Parallax receives demands from all phases of industry. Demands for unusual personnel. If you qualify, and we think that you can, we're prepared to offer you the most lucrative and rewarding work of your life.
Yeah, what do you get out of it?
We receive a sort of finder's fee. As I said, the jobs are difficult to fill. Your tests suggest that you have remarkable talents.
Yeah, what do you mean by talents?
You have difficulty holding on to a job, don't you?
I don't know, I just don't like to take a lot of shit, so people say I got antisocial tendencies.
Right. Tell me, has it ever crossed your mind that maybe it's everybody else's problem that they don't get along with you?
Why?
Because you see, the very quality that gets you in trouble is what makes you potentially invaluable.
What's that?
Your aggressiveness.
Aggressiveness?
Right. I don't want to intrude on you while you're reading. But get in touch with me personally if you'd like to go further.
But man is herded like an animal because that's another easy way to control his actions. And it just makes it a whole lot more difficult for the spiritual individual to stand alone, you know, the whole concept of the outsider. And can the outsider even take that type of ostracization and feeling of alienation? Or can he learn to live with it as a necessary evil? And try to find a center in some way? But symbolism is used a lot. Not only words and trigger words, but certain kinds of symbolism will be used. And I believe that these people, even when they approach priests, you know, maybe if they have some mental problems, what's your options? You know, nobody's gonna understand you and your family are around you, so you're bound to have to go to a priest or some sort of psychologist, psychiatrist. And in my mind, you know, that's really could be potentially very dangerous. Because I've got questions about who these people work for, you know, and what kind of allegiances they have, and how many strange deaths have taken place while you're in the custody of these men in white.
Why is Bayer Corporation the rat of the week?
Internal documents show that after this company positively, absolutely knew that they had a medication that was infected with the AIDS virus, they took the product off the market in the U.S. and then they dumped it in France, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The medicine's called Factorate. It was an injection medicine that was used for hemophiliacs, mostly children. Children had been born with an incurable disease.
Hold on, Mike. So hold on. So you're telling me that Bayer knew that this drug was infected with the AIDS virus, they yanked it from the market in America, and then they dumped it in markets overseas?
They had to figure out a way, Joe, to make a profit on a product that they could not sell in America. So they made a huge profit. They dropped the product in Japan, Spain, and France.
Each year in the U.S., thousands of women learn they have cervical cancer. I could be one less.
One less statistic. One less.
Because now there's Gardasil, the only vaccine that may help protect you from the 4 types of human papillomavirus that may cause 70% of cervical cancer.
I want to be one less woman who will battle cervical cancer. One less.
Like all vaccines, Gardasil may not fully protect everyone. The side effects include pain, swelling, itching and redness at the injection site, fever, nausea, or dizziness.
Gardasil is not for women who are pregnant.
Gardasil does not prevent all types of cervical cancer, so it is important to continue with routine cervical cancer screening.
Gardasil will not treat cervical cancer. Ask your doctor about getting vaccinated with the only cervical cancer vaccine, Gardasil.
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 With Gardasil, you could be one less.
O-A-E-L-E-S-S. I want to be one less. One less. O-A-E-L-E-S-S.
Collapsed after being given the cervical cancer vaccine Gardasil. Health authorities are urging parents to stay calm, insisting the drug, which is being offered to students in WA, is safe.
Brooke Levi thought the Gardasil shot she had on Friday at Engadine High was going to protect her. But now she blames the cervical cancer vaccine for a bad reaction.
I want to pass out and just throw up and just go to sleep.
Brooke ended up at Sutherland Hospital. 2 weeks ago, Melbourne student Natasha D'Souza also felt unwell after being vaccinated.
I actually wasn't looking too good and I was looking a bit green in the face. And then I just basically collapsed about 5 minutes into class.
Natasha says her arms and legs were paralysed and she couldn't speak. She wasn't the only girl to have the jab, then fall sick.
Yeah, there were girls dropping like flies, basically.
Medical authorities have declared the reactions aren't linked to Gardasil. They've blamed fear of needles.
The after effects are very, very rarely serious, and the benefits of the vaccination are very, very important.
There's no reason to stop the vaccination program. The vaccines have been thoroughly tested both in Australia and overseas and have been found to be extraordinarily safe.
70,000 Gardasil vaccinations have been administered since the drug's approval last year. Full protection against the virus that causes cervical cancer requires follow-up shots, but many girls aren't keen to chance it.
I don't want to after going through this.
Damien Smith, 7 News.
Coming up in 7 News, a warning to diabetics about the deadly side effects of a popular medication.
All of the money from the health industry goes into the medical monopoly and the drug trust. Interestingly enough, the Rockefellers control every major drug company in the world, and now when I say control, I mean directly. They have, among the directors and officials of each of the 18 largest drug companies in the world, they have men from Chase Manhattan Bank, from the Exxon oil company, and so forth. So they're right there, the names, I have all their names in my book, Murder by Injection.
So it's a terrible problem, terrible problem. And if people are not willing to go holistic and really have a holistic background, you could be jumping from the frying pan into the fire. When you try to approach so quote-unquote professionals that give you help, well, you might be going to the most psychotic people that ever lived, the very people who have caused you to be the way you are through their whole media manipulation and their whole infrastructure of society. Like, that goes back to the question of who is sane, what is sanity? Is there anybody sane in this world? You know, the more you start to look at it, the more you start to realize, no, you're not. You're in some sort of, hideous Planet of the Apes type experiment here. And man is a terribly, terribly disassociated and fragmented individual.
People come to me all the time asking me to medicate them. The implication behind that was that human beings, like all other animals, have a particular ideal model. It had a machine-like quality to it. We know what the model should be, and they ask the medications, they ask of me to give them medications that would push them back to this particular model they have. An unrealistic model, but a very static model of man as machine.
What was happening was that large parts of normal human experience, grief, disappointment, loneliness, were all being reclassified as medical disorders. In the process, a new system of management was emerging. The drugs took away those complex and difficult feelings and made the individuals happier. But they also made them simpler beings, more easy to predict and manage, and closer to the machine-like creatures at the heart of the economic models.
By using checklists of symptoms about emotions, you have gone out and confused normal human responses to life with mental disorder, and therefore created an illusion of a vast epidemic. A medicalized illusion, and obviously a situation where you medicalize is a situation where your focus will not be on social change, it will be on controlling individuals to fit in properly. That's the subtle and overall danger here, that it could serve our kind of social economic systems needs in a way in which we become more efficient but less human.
I will never veer away from this whole concept of consciousness, the effects on consciousness. So it's really refreshing for me to read people like Jim Keith, and also even Alex Constantine to a certain degree, where he talked about his book Covert War Against Rock, amongst many others, is fantastic, because there's all sorts of little subsections of this mind control game. There's the cult of Dionysus, which is a very ancient cult that has specifically dealt with the concepts of the Solar King involving a lot of alchemy. alchemical principles. Again, not as people would mostly understand that kind of study, but as I said, any study that is meant to be the uplift of your soul can also be used to drag you right down into a completely anti-human place. And the alchemical message of the 12 steps of the Sun King, like Hercules went through the 12 signs of the zodiac, you know, the 12 trials, and you have Horus going through the 12 hours of night and the 12 hours of day. Well, you see, they also throw up people's champions who manifest these archetypes, because mythology is full of archetypes, and these mind manipulators and these people who are very familiar with the truth about mythology are able to manipulate stereotypical people, either people in their own bloodline, who are then later put before you as, oh, it's just the person next door, you know, the Durans you see in The Cure, and, you know, Jim Morrison and all these people, and you don't know who, in fact, these people really are. Well, I got questions about a lot of these people in bands through their names, through the symbolism that they use. I mean, people are only going to go and pick up, you know, albums of the Lords of the New Church, you see, and, you know, certain bands, certain even personalities within the movie business. Well, we accept you've got geniuses. We accept you've got, you know, phenomenal minds on the artistic level, the Werner Herzogs, the Alfred Hitchcock. You know, we have no problem accepting that you've got exceptional minds of genius, but we can't understand that you have dark minds of genius in the same boat as well. Hell, man hasn't even got around to understanding that enemies in the world are created in exactly the way that allies are created. If a country approaches another country, or a government approaches another country government and says, we want to be allies, and then they shake hands and they have agreements, you've just created an ally. Well, then what is so unbelievably difficult for people to understand that the same action, similar action, causes political enemies to exist? You create your enemies. In fact, you might even have your own men in there, you know, running the government in order to make these enemies. This is how this dialectic works. Now, in the field of pop music and rock and all of these things, you know, I don't approach it from a Christian point of view, so I'm not going to sort of, you know, hammer these people just because they've seen wearing a pentagram one day, or, you know, they dress in black or something nonsensical, like a lot of the Christians, you know, who try their best to critique this stuff. Unfortunately, they get like way off, you know, in my opinion, and basically it comes into hammering their own theories. You know, you're going to have to be very impartial when you investigate occult matters. You know, Christianity is an occult agenda which has been used by the mind controllers endlessly. You know, wasn't it Mark Hinckley or David Chapman was involved in some Christian network? You know, I know he looked after children. He spent a lot of his time working in children's homes, in daycare and things like that. So these are virtuous Christian, soulful people who are not able to adjust to their society, and then were picked up or experimented on, or just asked to even do a simple questionnaire, just like the old Scientology gig. Well, we're doing a poll, we're doing a research, we're doing a survey. You know, we got the 7-page, you know, obligatory document we give out. You know, you don't know where that document is going. You don't know where that is going to end up, or who's going to be studying it and going, interesting. Then they file them away and use them whenever they need it. This is exactly how it happens. You have to be very careful with all of this. Who knows where that gigantic Scientology, you know, join-up sort of questionnaire thing is really going, and what computer is reading it to find out exactly who you are and whether you fit one of their mind control, you know, schema or not. And you know, by the time you find out, it's too late. But these individuals often who are exceptionally gifted can also be used, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. And they are put before you, they're stereotypes, but they represent powerful archetypes. One of them being the Sun King, the Solar King, like Elvis Presley. And in fact, it's absolutely uncanny in the last concerts that Elvis did, where he almost verbally is talking in terms of solar symbolism. If you can decode what he was saying on stage at some of the last concerts that he did, it's absolutely remarkable how much solar symbolism he's using, unbeknownst to himself, which is again how the archetype works through the stereotype. And one of the key things is that when the Solar King is about to die or end his cycle, some of the mythologies, not all of them, but some traditions claim that the sun must die in water, in some kind of plunge bath or in some kind of lake. And if you open some very early, you know, pictures of alchemy that are woodcuts, you can find these online, you will literally see that. You will see the king in his old age immersed in water. And where have we seen that before? You know, Jim Morrison, perhaps, Brian Jones. You know, there's a whole, even the concept of dying on your own vomit or dying in alcohol, you see, in your lungs, is a water-based ritual type of thing going on here. So in the case of so many of these people, we need to look into some of the ritual elements of what was going on.
Of course, the Mafia had their hooks into the music business going back to the jukebox wars. And then in World War II, the OSS started up a program called Operation Underworld, which entailed the actual recruitment of key Mafia figures to operate in Italy and the United States, right? And after World War II, they continued this brotherhood between the CIA and the Mafia that continues to the present day. Now, under Operation Chaos, I mentioned that all intelligence agencies have been brought into the umbrella program. Well, the Mafia was brought into it too because they were central to the music business itself, and they could be used to control and ultimately, in some cases, murder musicians who are outspoken in their opposition to the U.S. government. Jimi Hendrix was killed for two reasons. First of all, he had made statements in the teen press calling for the Black Panthers to go to Washington, D.C. and shoot the place up. Secondly, he had done a benefit for Bobby Seale and the Chicago 8. And that got the attention of the FBI and a program called COINTELPRO, which was a surveillance and assassination program. And it led to the murder of 28 Black Panthers. Tupac Shakur makes 29 because he was a Black Panther. Hendrix linked up with the Black Panthers, and for that reason, he was a dead man.
But the Jim Jones thing has been blown wide open. If people know how to, you know, read, they can go to Colonel James Bogart's book, Call to Serve, which is a fantastic book. It actually deals very deeply with the truth behind the Kennedy assassination. And there's other books that detail the truth about the Jim Jones thing and show that it was a British crack unit, not the SAS, but the Black Panthers or the Black something or other, happened to just be on maneuvers, right, in Guyana, within a mile from where the assassinations are meant to have taken place, the so-called suicide. If anybody believes that, I mean, they need their head examined. But, you know, it just turns out that when you really do the research, you find that some crack, secret, operational, you know, crack squad of British troopers are on location in Guyana at that time, and it vanished as mysteriously as they came, and the investigation never covered their presence. You know, and so, you know, all the way across the quasi-understanding of religion and cultism. I think we were talking earlier about how you said the cults were studied by the marketing men, the media, straight commercialistic people to see about allegiances so they could start, you know, infiltrating their own commercials for stupid cars and stuff like that with this cultish sense of this imagery, you know, to engender belonging, in the sense of belonging. All that tribal stuff again.
When I was a brand manager at Procter & Gamble, my job was basically to make sure the product was good, develop new advertising copy, design the pack. Now a brand manager has an entirely different kind of responsibility. In fact, they have more responsibility. Their job now is to create and maintain a whole meaning system for people, through which they get identity and understanding of the world. Their job now is to be a community leader. It is the big monopolistic.
Ad strategist Douglas Atkin, an expert on the relationship between consumers and brands, says he had a eureka moment one night during a focus group.
I was in a research facility watching 8 people rhapsodize about a sneaker. And I thought, where is this coming from? This is, at the end of the day, a piece of footwear. But the terms they were using were evangelical. So I thought, if these people are expressing cult-like devotion, then why not study cults? Why not study the original? Find out why people join cults and apply that knowledge to brands.
I'm loyal to this practice because it's done so much for me.
If Atkin could find what pushed a person from mere fan to devoted disciple, perhaps he could market that knowledge.
Most of the people I discuss the WWF with know that it's not a sport. Right. It's a masculine ballet.
So he compared dozens of groups he considered cults with so-called cult brands, from Hare Krishna to Harley Davidson.
If you're smart
and kind of individual, that's what you drive.
From Falun Gong to Mac.
I think there's something about Mac users, like they get it.
We just had discovered something. They realize there are other people like them and they cooperate on certain projects, and it's part of belonging to the tribe.
And the conclusion was this, is that people, whether they're joining a cult or joining a brand, do so for exactly the same reasons. They need to belong and they want to make meaning. We need to figure out what the world is all about, and we need the company of others. It's simply that. Saturn is a really good example. It's a mass cult brand. For example, 45,000 people turned up to spend their holiday, their vacation time at the factory in Tennessee, instead of going to Disney World or the Grand Canyon. Now, why would they do that? It's because they wanted to meet other people who own Saturns. They wanted to meet the rest of the Saturn family. They wanted to meet the people who made the car. The people who made the car wanted to meet them. And the people who ran the Saturn business knew that.
This summer,
they not only knew it, they turned it into an ad, which only brought more people into the Saturn family.
We called it the Saturn Homecoming. They could see where the idea for a new kind of car company had taken shape, and we could thank them for believing we could do it.
And they created a great meaning system for Saturn. In those fantastic commercials, their meaning system was based on old-time values of community. It was a kind of an icon that America yearned for but couldn't find anymore.
And that's the object of emotional branding, to fill the empty places where non-commercial institutions like schools and churches might have once done the job. Brands become more than just a mark of quality. They become an invitation to a longed-for lifestyle, a ready-made identity.
So as long as man has not got a center, as long as he's, divorced from his own center, not aware about how his consciousness is being manipulated, he will remain open to this kind of manipulation. Fantastic comment on this in Lord of the Rings. They didn't bring it out in the movie, except in one very short line, which is hard to miss, but in the book they emphasize it very, very prominently, that when they approaching the wizard Saruman, who's a character in the story who's basically was a good man turned evil, that the other wizards in the know, or the other elders in the know, continually warn anyone who should approach Saruman to beware his voice.
The white wizard approaches.
To beware his use of language, because that alone will hypnotize you, and no matter how strong you are, you'll be pulled into his web.
Do not let him speak. He will put a spell on us.
I just loved that. I thought that was fantastic, a very powerful image. They did bring it out a little bit in the movie, but this whole idea of the seduction of a man's voice and the power of charisma, and the ability, and of course the media uses this a great deal. And you have, this ties back into the whole concept of the god Mercury. If anyone's familiar with the symbolism of Hermes and Mercury and Thoth, and the earlier version of all of these gods was Ogma from the Celtic tradition, and even Hern being the origin of the word Herm or Hermes. It's all Irish Druidic. Those gods were the gods of language. Those gods were the gods of words. Those gods were the gods of communication, with the understanding that communication by words is a phenomenally powerful and important weapon of both the good and the bad side. Interestingly, Ogma, the Celtic god, his other two traits was strength. They taught symbolically like this. Okay, so Ogma is the god of language, but he's also the god of strength. Yes, because language is strength. Language is a form of power. Man who knows how to manipulate language and words is strong. What was his title, his name? They call him the Honey Mouth. Ogma the Honey Mouth, because, and I guess there's even Scandinavian, I think Loki had the power of that, almost a hypnotic, ability with words.
Art is like magic, the science of manipulating symbols, words or images, to achieve changes in consciousness. The very language of magic seems to be talking as much about writing or art as it is about supernatural events. A grimoire, for example, the Book of Spells, is simply a fancy way of saying grammar. Indeed, to cast a spell is simply to spell, to manipulate words, to change people's consciousness. And I believe that this is why an artist or writer is the closest thing in the contemporary world that you are likely to see to a shaman.
When you hear these talismanic words like control, security, stronger America, strength, realize that they're talismanic words. They're being used against you. They're seduction words to try and get you to accept this because you don't have that. Well, you've been raped of that. The people who are selling you one story here have actually taken away the very things that you needed that were in your psyche to begin with.
I am continuing and I am increasing the search for every possible path to peace.
We maintain our strength in order to deter and defend against aggression, to preserve freedom and peace.
No one, friend or foe, should doubt our desire for peace.
The United States wants peace.
We seek peace. We strive for peace.
I pledged in my campaign for the presidency to end the war in a way that we could win the peace. I respect your idealism. I share your concern for peace. I want peace as much as you do.
We cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud. Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Botulinum, VX, sarin, nerve agent.
Iraq and Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda.
Iraq and Al-Qaeda.
Terrorism.
Cyber attacks.
Nuclear program.
Biological weapons.
Cruise missiles, ballistic missiles.
Chemical and biological weapons.
Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
President Bush has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Tony Blair has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Donald Rumsfeld has said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Richard Butler has said they do. The United Nations has said they do. The experts have said they do. Iraq says they don't. You can choose who you want to believe.
The sources that have deceived us so constantly don't deserve our trust. And to the extent that we give them our trust, we set ourselves up to be scammed again and again.
There are reports that there is no evidence of a direct link between Baghdad and some of these terrorist organizations.
There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
I will build new partnerships to defeat the threats of the 21st century. Terrorism and nuclear proliferation, poverty and genocide, climate change and disease. And I will restore our moral standing so that America is once again that last best hope for all who are called to the cause of freedom, who long for lives of peace, and who yearn for a better future.
And this is used endlessly in the media by the drip feed method of just constantly downloading the same idiotic memes that you consciously would think you resist. But if they're repeated for the 10, 20 years and you've been growing up, before you know it, you're a parrot of all of that. You don't even realize it was implanted. That's the whole point. You're not meant to realize that your thinking is not your own. That's the smokescreen I was talking about. You're not meant to know that you're under hypnotism. You're meant to think you're perfectly normal. So they're going to sell you the most irrational, most satanic, most vile, pornographic lies, but they're going to sell it in a capsule that makes you think that you're perfectly spiritual, perfectly adjusted, totally normal. As this continues, as this process continues, the division between the outsider who's really sane and the unsane gets wider and wider and wider. What are people complaining about? That they can't believe the world they're walking around in. Sane people are going, I can't handle it, I can't work, it's terrible, the people are idiots. Yeah, but that didn't happen last year, that didn't happen 2 months from, that didn't happen, 2 months ago. You're seeing the symptom, not the cause. You're seeing the symptom of an immensely long, phenomenally detailed and interesting and complex. What was Soviet Russia? You can sum up the whole gig of communist Russia in one sentence. experiment, social experimentation. Meaning you split hairs as to whether it was a Darwinian experimentation or an Orwellian Darwin, blah, blah, blah. It's an experiment in how to control human beings who very easily were controlled. Oh my goodness, 33 people are shot dead. Everybody is just tripping over themselves with awe and amazement and anger and frustration. Let me see, what else is going on in the world right now? What else has been going on since 2001? Let me see, what's happening in Iraq or Iran right now? Can we ask a question about that? What was going on during the previous George Bush? Was there a thing called Desert Storm in which millions of people were killed, children were wiped out, incinerated? In Panama, were people not burned to death with lasers and incinerated in their own cars, completely innocent people? Then we have Grenada before that. Grenada. There you have, where do we stop? How many wars do we need? But your children die. Of course it's horrible. But can we have some context here? Can we have some sanity here? That just because your little pathetic, mediocre lifestyle has now been shaken up by something you don't understand, that's the only violence you think it exists in this world? Somebody has to be wielding, a 38 on your own street, in your own backyard, before you realize that there's such a thing as violence in the world? I'm here to tell you that all of that kind of violence, including the genocide, including the mega death, chew on this, that all of that, all through history, is a tiny aspect of the violence that exists in the world. That's the stuff you can see with your five senses. But as any competent psychologist will tell you, that is a very small, sadly, that is a symptom. That's what that is. That's an outpouring and outletting, a playing out in the world. Obviously helped and assisted by those who would like to have chaos rule in the world, yes. But where is its roots? You're going to keep studying the, leaf? You're going to keep studying the bloom and not ask where the root is? Or we'll have a wonderful society tomorrow where they'll be able to prune that really easily. And we won't have any of that violence because, in fact, we'll have a new world order. The chaos out of control. Everything's in chaos. People killing themselves. And we have a perfect structure now that will always deal with that. But will the root be ever looked at? If the root is not looked at, I don't care what kind of order or system is involved in the world of man that, prunes that or, keeps that nicely culled or caged or whatever. I happen to know that the root is twofold. The root of all of this mayhem, chaos, and destruction and immorality is actually a twofold root. The one root is in man's inability to look at his dark emotions, which is a psychological look at this.
What are you looking at? Huh?
And the other root is in the fact that there is an agency working in the world to engender that. Now, luckily in the conspiracy movement today, what's jokingly called the conspiracy movement, or I prefer to call it the alternative research community, we have now authors and people from all walks of life who are investigating that fact, that second root. That we think that this is not by chance. We don't really think that man is that immoral. We don't really think that man of his own nature will run around, fighting wars and building napalm bombs and all that. So maybe there's something else going on. Finally, the human race is waking up to the fact that yes, that's right. Somebody has kickstarted this and maintains it through the perpetuation of people's false allegiances and all the rest of it. And I'm very happy and glad to see that taking place. This removing of the lid, which is astrologically connected to Pluto, the planet Pluto, or the archetype Pluto, or the New Age. The real truth about the New Age is that the revelations that arise because man gets sharper in his critical ability and starts to look beneath the surface of reality. That's great. What I'd really like to see, though, and what I'm hoping to very much help pioneer in this era, is more attention on the first root as well, which is that human beings need to examine their own private consciousness to understand some of the dynamics of the full psyche, not just the ego and not just the programmed brain self, because the brain is a machine programmed by the world. But then you also come in with a thing called the mind, which has been programmed over millennia or generations. People need to know about the tripartite division or schemata of the ego, of the brain, of consciousness, from the Freudian point of view. They should also find out about the quaternity schemata of Jung. It was a little bit similar to Freud, but a little bit different. These people have, understood the dynamics, the anatomy of something that you can't see, consciousness. People know about the body. You got 2 arms, you got 2 legs, you got 1 head. Okay, well then what is the anatomy of your consciousness? Anybody ever thought about that? Well, yes, somebody did. It's called Sigmund Freud. People need to pick up his books, get on the web and find out what is the anatomy of your consciousness. What is thinking? How do you think? What is thinking? How does that happen? What is thought? Who's thinking about thought? Because if you don't ask these questions, you're not going to have too much of an understanding of what might be spirit or all of that. You're looking for the spiritual, but if you don't know what you are, how can you ever find out the other? So the real journey now begins. All of these traumas and tragedies are in a way a catalyst. Sad but true that man has to learn through tragedy, but then, hey, wait a minute, even the Greeks knew that as far back as you go, if man is left without tragedy, he'll just sit on his ass and do nothing all day long. He will sun himself and he will take care of his narcissistic, personal, sensationalistic needs, and nothing of any other thing will cross his mind ever. So unfortunately, the universe, nature, whatever you want to call it, fate, has to sort of deliver man what we would call tragedy, and therefore it wakes him up as a catalyst to him looking at deeper things. This is very, very necessary. And one of those areas now is that he needs to really continue the investigation of his own thinking, his own consciousness, and realize that the secrets, that's where the secrets lie.
One thing is sure, a great change of our psychological attitude is imminent. That is certain.
Why?
Because we need more. We need more psychology. We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself. He is the great danger, and we are pitifully unaware of it. We know nothing of man, far too little. His psyche should be studied, because we are the origin of all coming evil.